Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest recording of the Coaching Outdoors podcast. Today is an international podcast. We are coming to you from various countries around the world, and our guest today is Christiane. So I think the best thing I can do is ask you, Christiane, to introduce yourself to our listeners and our watchers.
Yeah, so my name is Christiane Frischmuth. I'm a citizen both of Germany and the US. I currently live in Washington, D.C, and my German tribe is located near Frankfurt and in Berlin. And I am, in terms of my business identity, I'm a single woman-owned company owner, and I coach, I facilitate in organizations and teams. I do organizational change, and I'm also a wilderness quest guide. Those are some of my various identities, and I'm just excited to be here. Oh, and a fierce environmentalist. I must not forget that. Greeny all the way to my bones.
Save the best label till last and really promote it. And yeah, thank you for that introduction, kind of sharing different parts of your identity. And there's definitely some elements that we're looking forward to kind of diving into and discovering how that's kind of influenced your coaching and how you support your clients. But just kind of to kickstart the conversation, there's a question that we ask all our guests when they come on board, is linked to their kind of generally their childhood and their earliest memory of being outdoors. So it's a bit multi-layered. So it's what's your earliest memory, and then why do you enjoy being outdoors?
Yeah, I've actually been walking with that question. I don't know if it's my earliest memory, but the image that keeps coming up is sitting on the 3 steps that led to my grandma's kitchen. She lived on a farm, and I grew up with my parents on her farm. And so sitting on the back step, having the sun on me and the sun on my skin. And in the summer, like you literally can smell the sun on your skin. So having that memory and shelling peas that we had collected from the garden just a little while ago, and hearing birds, and just that kind of total feeling of comfort, I would say that is really in me.
I love the way you describe that as well. So you're describing a vision, you're also describing the tactile nature of the pea shelling, but also the sensation of the sun on your skin and the sound that you were hearing as well. So it's so multi-layered, the sort of our experiences with nature. It's not just one dimensional, that you hear it, you see it, you smell it, you taste it, you touch it. It touches all the senses, which is just such a wonder. And I'm imagining that picture in my mind just now as well. It's such a lovely, and that was in Germany, was that in
Germany? Yeah. And then of course I would take some of the peas and eat them because they're just so sweet. And so there are a lot of memories connected with sort of the location and the place all around it. I feel places really shape us. And so that landscape will forever, and that location will forever feel like my true home,
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's such a lovely image. And it would be great as well for you to share with our listeners how you've turned that love of nature, and you said you're a passionate environmentalist, and nature really obviously sounds like it's been a real part of your life. What's the backstory? How has that become part of your coaching, or become part of your business world? How do you marry the two together?
Yeah, so a couple of ways. One is that I never compromise on being outside. That is my sacred rejuvenation time. And so just for me to be able to be present to others, I need that. And so whether it's a walk or run at the end of the day, or recently I needed to become very courageous for a new step in my life. And so I went to a creek and stripped off and skinny dipped. I needed that. I needed to feel that I also take a lot of time out to be in nature. So every year I hike for many, 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 many weeks. And at significant times in my life, I've done solo hiking. So I solo hiked the John Muir Trail and the West Coast Trail. And so I need to do that. So that's for me. And then I do take nature into all my work relationships. And so whether it's encouraging my clients to avail themselves of nature and build practice around that for themselves, experiment in nature, make decisions when in nature. I also try to bring my clients to nature, whether it's working with a team or designing a leadership program or coaching. I try to have that be a shift. Don't stay in the room, go outside. And then I'll talk a little bit more about that, but really integrating that aspect into the way I coach. And then perhaps the other thing would be that I try to always bring the conversation also to what if you shifted your relationship with nature to a true partnership? What would be possible for you? Would you all of a sudden start thinking about caring for nature? Would you start thinking about supporting nature? Would you start thinking about putting solar on your house? And so I feel once you start shifting that relationship, that changes the meaningful actions you could do.
Mm. And hearing you talk about nature, it's very much ingrained. It's a part of you, and it's been a part of you since the beginning. And it's kind of emerged into your career and kind of blended. And just to kind of really kind of define and just explore that relationship like a bit further, like how do you share that? How do you define it? How do you kind of bring it together?
So I would say that I've always had this belief in partnerships, right? Like I absolutely hold partnership as the core of relationships in life. And so I feel that coaching is partnership, and also being in nature is a partnership with nature. And so when we approach nature in that way, it can be supporting us, it can be healing us, it can be challenging us, it can be providing life-giving support for us. And we need to do the same with nature, right? We need to support and heal and be with nature. So I think that's one way of how I bring it together, sort of the human relationships, but also nature is our home. If you think about it, people talk about what's your own true nature, right? Or what is not your nature. And so I find it's that blending of nature is not out there. Nature is also here, and bringing the two together. How can I best find, experience, be with my own nature? Well, it's in nature, it's our home, but it's also, we're part of it, we're interwoven. And so I think that's one belief. And then the other belief is that nature is welcoming. Nature is, perhaps I should say, it's when we grow up, as children, there doesn't seem to be this division between us and nature. We embrace it, right? Kids take off their clothes and dive into water. They take off their shoes and go and walk barefoot. And I find a lot of times when I encourage my clients to be in nature, they remember that part. And it's incredibly liberating. It gives space. It gives access to the senses. It's like, oh my God, I remember I used to do that. And so I think there's also this aspect of returning to that which we innately had be part of us, finding parts and reintegrating them. And then perhaps the third part is that I truly believe we all have a gift, a place, a reason of being here. And when we are really living into and finding that gift that we have to offer, like that pot of gold that we are, then we can really contribute to our community. and I think being in nature is the best place to find and believe that. So those are sort of the ways that I feel it comes together. Did I answer your question?
Wonderfully, absolutely wonderfully.
Okay.
And any answer is it's your answer. It's how you've interpreted the question into your love for nature and your connection with nature. And I love the description you said there about children and the fact that we are part of nature. We are within nature. It's not nature and us. And fascinatingly, we spoke to another coach, Peter Hawkins. And many people on our podcast will know who Peter Hawkins is. And he talked about that really strongly, about his belief that, we are nature, we are part of it. It's not we're going for a walk in nature. We're not taking our coaching conversations outdoors. We are nature. Nature's indoors, it's outdoors. It's just part of our intrinsic, like you said, we have a nature and we are within nature. And that story about children, I mean, I got married in the Lake District in England a few years ago now, and we got married in a copper mine in the Copper Mine Valley, and it was a beautiful May day, and it was 22, 23 degrees. It was beautiful, and there was a brook running down the side of our wedding venue, and it was all outdoors. We had a pagan hand fasting, and one of the best things about that day for me was every child that was there went into their natural state, exactly as you described. I looked over at one point, and they were all in the water. All of them had taken their clothes off and they just jumped in and they were splashing around having fun. And it's exactly what you just described. To them, it just seemed so normal to do that. It was a really hot day and there was water to play in. So that's what they did. They went and played in it. And it's such a beautiful connection with nature that I think as adults, we almost, it's maybe we don't forget it, but we become a bit kind of, scared maybe to have that connection with nature the way that children do. And it would be really lovely to hear a bit more about how that nature partnership works within your coaching and your actual coaching business. So how you sort of incorporate that partnership with nature in your outdoor coaching business.
So there are a few aspects to that. And so I think first is that nature is not just a place like we just talked about, but nature is an integral part of who we are and who we are part of. And so I try to really prepare when I work with clients that almost approach or that mental model. And sometimes, like you said, people are a bit scared or people have not had that in their lives. And so it's really giving people the confidence of, as we go into nature, how do I have the emotional and logistical and physical resources to do that? And so I think a real part of that is to prepare people for that. And just that preparation right there is such a confidence builder, so I think that's one part of doing that. The other part is to have nature be a way where you take questions or worries or challenges out of your mind and actually put it into your real experience, right? It's not just a landscape in your mind, but the landscape is out there. And so, for example, I have clients who go through significant transitions in their lives. And so they have just listened to the language. They have this questions of, how do I bring flow back into my life, right? Flow, water. I've lost the larger perspective. Well, where do you gain perspective? You go up high. I don't know which path to choose. I feel depressed. Well, there are depressions in the ground. I'm afraid that without the structure as I retire, I don't know how to find my way. I'll be lost. And so as you listen to these questions, I actually can co-create with my clients the real experience. So let's go outside. Let's really think through, how could you explore these questions for real? So let's go to this place out in nature. Find the place that you feel attracted to or repelled by, and see what you feel, see, hear by being in that place. Take that intention with you. And very often, I would say almost every time, people come back and say, I have experienced, I have found something that's not just cerebral, you know, it's a physical experience that reverberates for a long time. And I would say the key part of creating that experience is also to give the clients the chance to do that reflection or that experience on their own, right? So that they can have ownership, that they have the courage. Now, you could be 5 feet away. You could be saying, I'm here, you know, take your cell phone. If you get worried, you get lost, call me. You walk for an hour and then come back, or we stay connected on the phone. There are different ways of shaping it. But I think this time of I'm literally crossing a threshold, and with my intention, I'm going to have an experience in nature. Then I come back to you, and then we process this. I find is absolutely important. And it's a time of being in partnership with nature and seeing what nature can reveal to you. It's not being task-oriented. It's not going for a run. It's not walking the dog. It's not having a checklist in your mind. I call it making it a sacred pause.
A sacred
pause. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes also from my practice of being a vision quest or wilderness quest guide, where preparing people for this time alone in nature, where you are really exploring something that you're holding as a question or a challenge in your life or a transition, and then coming back, you know, and as you look at different cultures, almost every culture I can think of has had these ceremonies or rites of passage or moments where people felt compelled to find answers or get a regrounding by going outside. You know, President Roosevelt, he lost his wife and his mother. He went out to nature. You know, John Muir, look at religious stories, you know, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, they found their enlightenment in nature. You know, if you look at native indigenous practices, when a member of the community becomes an adult and needs to become a responsible person for the community, they go out to nature and then are welcomed back with maybe a spirit name or some new insights. And so these rituals always take place in nature. And I think there's a reason for that. So that can also become part of how you position it in your coaching. You know, I'm going to help you to find that ceremony, that sacred pause that gives you the chance to deeply explore in nature. And then when you come back, I'll support you in integrating that.
And I love the way you kind of segued into this naturally, because this was kind of one of the key topics that we really wanted to talk to you about today, and it's just kind of emerged naturally, which is just beautiful. And you know, you set the scene, and it'd be great to have kind of to set the context a little bit more, like a tangible, so within these rituals, within these sacred spaces, something that either you've experienced yourself kind of personally that supported you through a period of transition potentially, or like a specific example for a client, because that really helps our listeners kind of place it and just gain a kind of a deeper understanding of it more. Yeah.
So I'll take the example of a client. And so she, retired after many years of being in a very fulfilling and structured environment, moving into really creating a new phase of life. And so we worked together in coaching to, first of all, really, which all coaches do, setting the intention for what to explore, right? And so that can shift over time. But in this case, it was how do I deal with this unknown? How do I deal with, oh my God, it's all up to me now. It's freedom, but it can also be scary. And so once we had come up with that intention, exploring the unknown, exploring the fear of that, exploring how can I re-find my courage and confidence that I know I can trust myself to find the path step by step. And so then we decided on a place in nature and came together, and we really contracted around what would make her feel safe to do that exploration, right? And so that includes, do you want to be alone completely? How long? Do you know where to go? Do you want more instruction or help or not? Do you want a map or create your own map? Do you want to have me as a resource, or do you want to just leave your cell phone behind? So it's a lot of that shaping. And then we together created a ceremony, and I call it a threshold, to say, as of now, this time that I will now be spending on my own, the client, in nature, is going to be that sacred pause. And sacred for me means that you imbue it with a non-negotiable intent, right? It's my time. I decide what to do. Nobody can disturb me. I protect that time. And I sort of give myself to the universe and say, you know, show me, teach me, apprentice me. But this is imbued with with that importance. And so in that case, you know, she chose to look at 2 trees and say, when I step across this, I am stepping into my sacred time, into that purpose-filled time. And Christiane, you will stay on the other side of that threshold, and you are from mountaineering base camp. And I said, I will be here. You can rely on me. I will hold you. I will think about you. I'll send you good vibes. I will hold your intention. I will welcome you back. And you can always come back whenever you feel that's the best way to do it. You don't have to be scared beyond what feels challenging for you. And she later actually told me that just that comfort of having somebody in base camp was such a powerful experience, because we often don't have people hold us that way, you know, full-hearted. And so then she left and she decided, you know, where to go, and she had her experience, and she came back, and I was waiting for her, and she literally stepped back across the threshold, and we were okay touching. And so I welcomed her with a big hug and this just full-hearted expression of, you know, I was so proud of her, because she was doing this experimentation way out of her comfort zone. And her dedication to herself is also dedication to all of us, right? Because the more fully she can be herself, the more fully she can contribute, the more fully she can be there for her parents and her friends and for whoever she dedicates, you know, her future passion to. And then we sat down, and there's a process called mirroring, where you are asking the person to share their experience of what happened during the walk. And the first thing is to just fully listen to the story in an absolute non-judging way. Whatever happened, happened. You know, if she had said, I saw a dragon and I realized it was my dragon and I had to befriend it. If she saw a dragon, it's true, right? It could have been a tree that looked like it, but I'm saying anything that happens during that walk is real. And so after hearing that story, I would do a process which is called mirroring, where I reflect the story back to her exactly the way I heard it. And I often do it in the third person. So I would say, you know, I heard the story of a courageous woman who walked out to conquer her fears and find her courage to chart her new path. And then I would go and tell her what I heard maybe even drawing on myths or legends or, you know, heroine stories that I might be hearing, giving her some details that I heard, weaving it into the intention. And the idea is truly to bring additional wholeness and to have her truly hear from a loving perspective of, you know, all the elements that you might or might not have taken in. Because, you know, when we tell our story, we only can hear so much. And then I just pause, and then often action steps or practices emerge, which is then the incorporation, you know, into the body. So that's one example of how a coaching session can go. And of course, you know, the length of time that people are solo can be 3 days and 3 nights. It can be half an hour. Yeah, and it works actually very well virtually, given our time right now with COVID, that I have done the setup and the incorporation via Zoom. And then people spend their solo time whenever they can, but they tell me when they go and when they come back to provide that, that safety for them. So that's one example of how this process can work.
It's just such a wonderful example, such a wonderful story. I think our listeners will just be so mesmerized just to hear the full, and so clearly explained as well, the steps that you take and the I want to use a better word, but the process that you follow. But just that concept of the sacred pause. I love that idea. I've not heard that before, but it seems so obvious and so true that we need that. We need to give ourselves and allow ourselves that time. And I think maybe more so in the Western world. You described many different religions and ways of life where they actually do this regularly. And I think maybe in the Western world, we don't do this enough, and we don't tap into those sorts of indigenous practices maybe as much as we should do, or those kind of sacred practices maybe as much as we should. And, you know, it would be lovely to get your view on what can we in the Western world benefit from these practices that maybe, you know, as you said, the Native Indians, the way they experience it, the Buddhists, lots of religions around the world have these experiences, and maybe we don't enough, and maybe we should. What can we do in the Western world to really gain the benefits of these sorts of practices?
I think a lot has already shifted by acknowledging the power of what has come from the Eastern world in terms of mindfulness. And if you think about it, so many, you know, silent retreats, so many meditation, people practicing naturally come to nature. And so I think already there's this recognized benefit that when we are in nature, literally our brain waves change. You know, we can experience more balance. I actually just read an article, it's called The Science of Awe, that when we experience awe, we truly shift to a more humility-based, grounded, ethically inspired time. And 3/4 of those experiences or mindset happen in nature. And so I'm thinking, just think about is whenever leaders have to make big decisions that impact other people, how about, you know, first going for a walk where you feel grounded, connected, and you literally have this, wow, look at the sunrise. I mean, neuroscience clearly says it shifts your brain waves and creates different neural pathways. So we have in the West, we need a lot more science. And so I think that is one aspect, for example. I think the other thing is we have all these ceremonies. Think about weddings and baptisms and funerals, right? Where we are being witnessed in our community during very big life shifts. And so think about creating those for ourselves. So if, you know, when somebody gets divorced, in some ways it is a funeral, right? So when somebody retires, it's a funeral, it's a baptism, and it's a marriage of bringing those different parts into you. And so we're not without ceremonies. I think sometimes we have forgotten why we have them, and that we can do them in different ways, and that they're necessary. You know, what do you let go of? What do you bring on? And it's not just about your brain recognizing it. I think you need to be witnessed. You need to be publicly declaring like this vow or this promise to others and yourself. I think you need to physically do this. You need to physically say, I'm stepping into, or, you know, I'm burning something. I'm creating a new flow. I'm washing. And so all these ceremonies have natural parts to it. So I think there's perhaps a re-imbuing with the meaning that those ceremonies had, and making them part of our lives. You know, so for example, when I coach now, I literally, before every coaching hour, I step across the threshold in my mind, if I can't do it physically, so that that hour is my sacred time with that person. You know, sometimes I literally smudge sage, or I light a candle, or I have this rose quartz rock that I hold in my hand. And so I think it's more remembering or re-imbuing with the meaning.
And the way that you've just really pulled, you know, our obsession with evidence and the science and the intellectualization of everything, and, you know, how much we live in the head, and then just really shifted it to a deeper level that has been around for, you know, centuries and beyond, millennia. And it really, I don't know, for me, just brings up a lot around social conditioning and what is kind of expected, the transitions through life, and ultimately how much do we really consider them and make them our own and put our authentic selves into them, and actually how much scope there is to do that. And I think that's a really kind of interesting reflection that I'll definitely be taking away, and I'm sure will have kind of stirred thoughts in our listeners as well, is actually how can I make this truly meaningful for me, and really kind of that immersion in nature, open that up as well. So actually, whether it is through the ceremonies that we have within the Western world, how can we make them our own? How can it be a partnership with nature, as opposed to the kind of like tried and tested default, this is what you do kind of thing? So no, thank you for bringing it up, and just the sacred space as well, just that connection with our clients is what it is, and how can we kind of really center ourselves as we kind of move into that space and set it up. And I mean, you've got so much knowledge, and it's amazing that you've pulled together a program to support other coaches in their journey, and it would be really interesting just to have an insight into this coaching program that you've kind of created, called your True Nature, and just, you know, what spurred you to create it, how you created it, what's involved, just to kind of get like a little taster of it.
Yeah, so it really started more as a personal retreat, where I wanted to bring the wilderness quest experience to any person, right? And so I shaped this process that I guided people on in many, many different ways. And then as I brought it to my own coaching, I thought, oh, this might be of interest to other coaches. And so I looked first of all for partners, because I feel something like this is best held by more than one person. And then I took the process that I described to you, which I call sort of a, you know, you let go, sharpen your intention, then you have your solo time, and then you reemerge with those insights, and you start incorporating and prototyping and, you know, integrating it into your life, and made that sort of the basis for the process. And so we teach, my partners and I, we teach each of these steps along the model. And I want to say also that a similar model has been created more in the social change arena by some of the MIT practitioners, Otto Scharmer, Peter Senge. They call it Theory U, and Presencing is also a book. And actually the Presencing book was written based on Joe Jaworski's Vision Fast experience, and it emerged in their conversation. So also the organizational development field and so on is part of that. It's showing up in many places, Peter Hawkins. So we decided to chunk it into 16 hours, and we got accredited by the International Coaching Federation. And so we had to really design it to the competencies. Here's where listening, here's where contracting comes in. And so what we do is we take people through the model, both as a coach and as a coachee. And so there's let us introduce you to this step. Now you will partner. And so let's say, Anna Maria, if you and I were partnered, you would be the client, I would be the coach. We would be doing this particular step together. Then we would switch. So at each step, you get both experiences. And right now we're doing it virtually. So we have 4 sessions of 4 hours. And each session includes solo time. So at each session, there is like pause, you go out in nature, and then we come back. And so the Zoom time is the circle community time. And then there's always that experience. And so that's what we have crafted, but we're hoping very much that we can go back to also doing it in person, which has been a 2-night, 3-day experience. And so that's the program as we have shaped it now. And we're finding that people walk away with as much of a personal experience as they are the client going through this, as well as honing their coaching skills and coming away with a model and having tried things. And so I have a whole number of the growing alumni circle now who say, I am starting to use mirroring every time I coach, right? So it's a discrete tool. Or they say, I am now really experimenting with that sacred, making something sacred. So people take away different parts that they feel they can practice immediately. It's not always the whole process or model.
It's just such a wonderful thing, I think, for somebody to, like yourself, to create a process that works for you and clearly for your clients, and then think, okay, how can I help other coaches experience the same thing and follow a similar process? And then for other coaches like Anna Maria and myself to find that and go, oh, that just rings so many bells in my mind that I'm thinking, oh, I'd love to experience that. And for people to take that next step and share that with others as well, not just to sort of experience it themselves, I think is wonderful. And I'm sure your growing circle will grow even more, hopefully, with people listening to this as well. And as Anna Marie said, we'd love to spend so much longer talking with you and just getting into even more detail. But I think you mentioned a few things throughout our session today, a few resources, a few books that you've read. But it would be really lovely if you just towards the end of our chat, just share any of the resources you think that have really helped you to sort of shape the way that you coach and partner with the outdoors, and also share with us and with our listeners where they can find you if they want to find out more about you and your approach and how you do your coaching.
Yeah, so finding me is obviously through my website and gfconsulting.org. And I think you said earlier that you will also post something. So if the name is hard to follow, people can find that. And then I've been on a number of other podcasts. I'm on LinkedIn. So it's the usual culprits. We're developing new programs. We're hoping that we can partner with the Gestalt Institute, the Gestalt International Studies Center in Cape Cod. Also partnering, hopefully, we're just putting in a proposal for the American university, which is called Georgetown University, and they have integrated programs. So we're hoping that we could add that. So we're developing more partnerships and also program dates where we're just putting in place the program dates for the fall and 2022. And so resources, I'm looking over here because I pulled out a stack of books. And again, I'll just mention them. I know we could put that also in the information. But in terms of partnership, there is a woman called Rianne Eisler, and she's written a lot about partnerships, the partnership way, the power of partnership. She also talks about our model for interacting with nature and changing that. So that would be one thing. Any book by Bill Plotkin. He has written a lot about nature and the human soul, about the experience of vision quests. And I should say, I'm very careful with the language because there has been a lot of misappropriation. by using a process and not being given permission by those who hold the process in a very particular way. And so I'm using words to have the listener maybe understand it, but also being mindful that, for example, Vision Quest is really something that in a way was created not in the Western culture. And so again, being mindful of how we use these words. Then there is somebody called David Abram, and he has written about the spell of the sensuous and being animal. And he very much talks about rewilding, you know, like allowing ourselves to really live into our senses. And they've been incredibly inspiring. You know, there's this quote, dance like nobody is watching, you know, and sing like nobody can hear you. And that's it, you know, in nature, feeling that non-judging privacy and just, you know, I don't know, strip off and jump into the river, and it's that thing. Then there's this book by Larry Robertson called A Deliberate Pause, which was actually written for entrepreneurs, but it very much speaks to that sacred pause. And then I would say a very interesting book is by Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, and it's called The Four Shields of Human Nature. And this really gives an adult development framework to the seasons in nature and the seasons of our life and how to work that. I'll stop there because I could go on forever, but I think those probably would be a really good additional resource to all the coaching that our listeners already do.
Oh, wow. It sounds like there's a couple there that I'm like, oh, I've not heard of them. They're going to be going on my reading list.
Good.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for, you know, coming on and having this conversation with myself and Alex. It's always a pleasure to connect with coaches and beyond the UK, beyond Europe as well. Let's reach out further into America. And, you know, if you're an American coach listening, we would love to hear from you. And if you're working within this field as well, please do be in touch. Ultimately, this podcast is all about showcasing the work that so many phenomenal coaches are doing around the world. And it's all about learning from each other and discovering best practices. So big thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute kind of whirlwind, and you know, if we can get you back on the podcast in the future, it would be an absolute pleasure to host you again.
I would love that.
So thank you for our listeners for listening in. I hope that you found this conversation as fascinating as I did, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not a member of the LinkedIn group, please do jump on board and comment away. It's always great to have a bit of conversations going on there. I'm sure that you found the podcast through our website, which is coaching-outdoors.com. coaching-outdoors.com, and there is a load of massive resources, and we're kind of compiling some amazing interviews. So if you've not checked some of the other ones out, go and have a bit of an explore around there. So to pull everything together, it's a wrap from a bit of a grey Wiltshire, and I've been again staring very enviously at Alex. I'm going to have to get myself up to Scotland at some point.
It is a beautiful day. I did worry for a second I was going to get rained on, but the cloud went over. You might have seen me kind of, people who are watching, I might have got a bit dark in the background for a few seconds then, but yes, Christiane, it's been absolutely wonderful having you, and we will definitely keep in touch and have you back on again later on in the year, hopefully. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much in advance for your support.